Hello, this is Jerry Hanley from the Merlot Multimedia Educational Resources and Learning Online Teaching Organization and Skills Commons, and also a professor at California State University, Long Beach. And I am very grateful and appreciate the invitation to present here today at your conference, the International Symposium on Generative AI in Education and Practical Applications in Eldercare. The Sorry I can't be there live, but I hope this recording will provide you some useful information for the many initiatives that you're implementing there in Taiwan. The title of the presentation is Cooking Up: An Educational Strategy for the Elderly. And as you'll see, I'll be using some metaphors about cooking throughout the presentation. So today, it's going to be a presentation. And again, just want to thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this conference. I think international sharing of ideas and engagement really strengthens the global community and each of us individually. So just to begin with, some of the challenges we're all facing, but especially for elder care, is online living has become really a way of life for us all. And unfortunately, the elderly have been left behind in living online. And what we have to think about is how do we help the elderly and their support providers, that community of people, to how do we live to learn to live online and enable us to improve people's well-being and their success in achieving their goals throughout their lives. So one of the questions, when we say is, okay, that sounds like a good idea. How do we help people learn to live online? But how do we innovate our services to really enable these ways of working online to work for them? And there's a number of questions that we can use to guide our discussion today. Is one about how do we improve the digital literacy skills of the elderly so they live online? How do we help the healthcare providers of the elderly be more successful in delivering their services within an online environment and ecosystem? And also, since this is about generative AI, really, how can this really help us all live online more successfully? So hopefully in this presentation, I'll be showing you and explaining and suggesting strategies in which we can really bring these elements together in a complex system that we can manage effectively. Now, complexity is the key when we're talking about how do we integrate technology services, healthcare, and generative AI. And complex strategies and processes really require us to develop a conceptual strategy that helps us organize all these different factors that we have to really manage in an integrated way. And that's really a challenge for us as human beings, because when there's something new and complex, it really becomes a challenge for us to manage cognitively all these factors. And as a cognitive psychologist, these are important issues that I think face us all. And so today, what I'm going to talk about is using a metaphor, something that we know we're very familiar with, we've practiced it our lives, about cooking, and how that relates to effective online educational strategies. And the other element of the strategy I'm going to talk about is about open education. And about 6 months ago, I also presented a presentation about open educational resources, practices, etc. And I'm going to bring some of those ideas back when we're looking at how do we reduce the barriers for the elderly and again, they're partner healthcare providers. So when we think about cooking, and we're just going to get started with a few ideas, right? And using a metaphor is, when you're going to cook a meal and you're going to celebrate someone's birthday, right? You have to think through what am I going to plan? Then how it would do in the cooking, and then I serve it up and do the celebration, right? Now, when you're thinking about that planning process, it's so important to think about how the occasion in which you're going to serve that meal that brings traditions and social expectations. Because if I'm ready to cook a meal for a birthday, and that's going to be somewhat different than if I'm cooking a meal for after a funeral. And so understanding the purpose behind the learning about and the planning is critical. And then you think about it, well, who's coming for the birthday event, right? What are they expecting? What do they need? Do they have dietary preferences? What do they prefer? What would make that meal really produce an outcome that everyone, especially the birthday person, would enjoy the food, have the fun and the company, and recognizing these good times, right? So these elements that we often do kind of strategically and automatically, these are complex skills that I want to try to say, okay, when we're thinking about education, particularly for how do we help people live and learn online, what's their occasion for learning? So for an elderly is, how do I bank online? Or how do I get medical advice since I can't travel, right? And so understanding their purpose, their need, and who are they that we're inviting to be part of an online ecosystem? What are their traditional ways that the elderly learn and understand banking and healthcare, and what do they need and prefer? Because if we're going to start planning strategies, being user centered becomes so important. And I'll be going through some examples of how that user centered strategy of what's the purpose that people have, and what are the ways and expectations and needs that they have to come into the design of the educational services that will lead to the hopeful outcomes that all people will learn the skills, the knowledge they need to live successfully and in an online environment. How do I live in the way I want with the online services? So this is a little graphic. For those who might have heard my presentation before, we're just going to get a little review of this. And those who haven't, hopefully this will be a useful graphic and metaphor for, again, education and cooking. So whenever we're cooking, you got to have ingredients, right? Now, some of these things, they might be vegetables you grow in your backyard that you create yourself, and others you go out to the store and get. But those are essential building blocks for what we're trying to do when we're cooking a meal. And so when we think about education, particularly when we're thinking about opening up education with open educational resources, these are the materials, the simulations, the animations, the courseware, the ebooks, all these content elements that become the ingredients for an educational process. And when we think of those, what are those ingredients that are going to be important for the education of the older adults? Now, ingredients are not sufficient for you to deliver a good meal, right? You have to have recipes and the know-how. And so when we think about those, what we talk about within an educational process, it's what are the educational practices? What are the pedagogical strategies that we use about how do we combine all these ingredients to create a curriculum and a delivery that engages the students, the learners, in an effective ways. So we're going to talk about open education resources, but what's really going to be critical is what are the practices for combining these ingredients so now they will achieve a purpose for those learners. Now, I can have ingredients and I can have recipes, but I need a kitchen to cook it in, right? And this is where the technologies that you have, the utensils, the stove, the oven, all these things, the mixing bowls, really they become the technology tools that enable you to take the ingredients, the content, mix it up in a way, prepare it in a way that will then be useful and productive for the learning using the technology infrastructure here. And one of the technologies we're going to get to is about how generative AI now becomes a new appliance in your kitchen to be able to produce a learning experience with the recipes that you have and the ingredients that you have to deliver a quality education. Now, just a reminder about open educational, there's all types of resources that are out there, animation simulations, tutorials, ebooks, and then we have whole open courseware like MIT's Open Courseware Collection. MOOCs are about open enrollment. They're not open education resources, but they are free and open that can be used for people to have access to educational resources and experiences. Open textbooks, open access journals. If we have librarians there, this is an important movement within our academic libraries. And elements of this, and the reason why I'm bringing openness up, is free of cost. Financial barriers can become a significant barrier for learning, whether you're elderly or whether you're a student or whether you're a worker, a single mother, whoever that is. Cost is one of the major factors for um, learners not completing their educational degrees and even certificate programs. So these are things. Free of cost becomes important. Now, openness is also about that you can use this material freely and often use it in a way that you can customize for your context. And this becomes very important when it comes to developing the skills and knowledge of the elderly, because you have to customize these technologies for a different set of expectations, a different set of traditions, a different set of habits that will enable the older adult to be able to learn and use all the online resources, practices, and the technologies. Now, just a little reminder about open educational resources and the licensing that they have. It's a Creative Commons license. We won't go into that now, but what's important about open material is that you have the permission to reuse it. So I can take a resource as it is, or I can remix it with other things. I can combine it in a way. Okay, this is the recipe that you often have to think about. What is the combination of materials that would be really helpful for your older adult in learning how to develop their digital literacy skills or online banking or getting healthcare advice or looking for jobs or looking for volunteer work, whatever it might be. And these tools, being able to revise it and retain it for yourself and redistribute it as you wish, these all become important capabilities that enable you to develop practical applications for elder care. Because many of the times things are not designed for the unique demands and needs of populations. So just the opening of the opportunities for learning is about open educational resources that are freely online, the practices, how do I do this, the recipes, and the services, the technologies, right? And again, why this is becoming important? Because free eliminates financial barriers that can be very important for the elderly, and openness enables the customization for presenting information, engaging the older adult in ways that meet their expectations and their needs. So these are the important issues about why open e-learning can be very important for elder care. Now, what I'm going to go through now is a case study in which I worked with in the United States. There's a state of New Hampshire. And one of the important things about New Hampshire is that, one, it's a rural environment, and many, particularly the elderly, are in a low income bracket. One of the problems, it's in the northern part of the United States. You got snowy, cold winters. People can't get out, and New Hampshire citizens are independent minded. Their motto for the state is "Live free or die." So understanding again who is getting invited to this meal, what's the characteristics that are going to be important when you're trying to develop these social services, and they have what we focused in on for the elderly, and also they have an immigrant population of English learners too as well, that vary in age as well. So one of the challenges was, how do we help these populations effectively learn to live in an online environment where there are barriers for physically going to banks, going to grocery stores, getting healthcare advice in a physical way. Now, what the problems that the social services were having was they were not really effectively connecting with their populations. There wasn't enough people using the services. And the challenges, many of these social services, they may have focused on the financial assistance. But when a user comes to them, they say, I need some money because I have a healthcare problem, and I'm having trouble paying for someone who will come in and cover my basic needs because I'm having trouble, cooking my meals, and English is my second language, and you have one organization who's focused on one type of need, but the users come in with complex combinations. So when we're looking at how do we really use technology and these free and open resources, how do we begin to customize them for them? And so what I'm going to do is just going to open this online just to give you a little sense of, you might start off with they call it the benefits hub, that try to bring all these things together. Both the community members could use this and the service providers. And so how do we make it easy to say, okay, here's my financial assistance materials, right? Ways I can connect. These are for tax preparation or banking. And again, trying to make this easy for people to find it. But one of the challenges, and you can, and I have, this is a link in the PowerPoint, and you'll be able to play around with this. Here's the basic needs, searching for jobs. And the idea here is, this looks like this is a collection of materials that would be really useful to support the adult population, the elderly communities. But the problem was people were not connecting with these and understanding, how can I really use this? So they came to us and say, okay, this is a good first version, but now can you share with me let me just get rid of this for a second and then go back to the PowerPoint. So they said, how, can you provide an alternative way that will really connect more closely with our elderly community? So the first part is always around, if you're going to serve a population, how do you really do your homework and understand what are their needs, their challenges and goals, the barriers that they're facing? And so an important element is really doing a user-centered um, needs analysis, talking with a variety of people, and getting those requirements to understand what's the occasions for learning, what's the purpose behind their needs that they have, so that then when you design a website, it's aligned with what they're doing. And then, in a sense, what the elderly were doing is they were giving us their recipes. How do they need to combine materials? How are they thinking about uh, addressing their health needs, or their financial needs, or their employment needs, or their social interaction needs? That their recipes then drove us to how to remix, right? This is about open educational resources, free materials. How can I remix them so the recipe is right for what they need to prepare them to develop their digital literacy skills? So now we're just going to go and just show you an example of how those needs were, were used to drive a way to redesign a website, a resource that then could be more easily used. So in this case, we have older adults, and and based on the interviews, learning about what their needs are, we begin to say, okay, what are the agencies that are available, the general agencies for a whole variety of topic areas, again, providing them background choices, easy ways to pursue it. And I'm not going to click on all these things. I'm just going to show you a few. But one of the things is, how do you begin to organize the right tools for the population? So, for example, you know, here's some resources just to get people started. And so you're not going to want internet based for the teenager. So here's a link to internet basics for older adults. And it's a simple way, it's a background to say people are spending time. It's okay, yes. Colleagues like yourself are spending time on the internet. And what are all the things that you can find about best ways to use the internet, how to think about it, how to go about it, researching and browsing, banking and paying bills. So these are things that are important for the elderly community. From how do I keep in touch with my social communities and various, how do I do my shopping when it's wintertime and I need things and I can't get to the stores? Guess what? Amazon, right? So here are a variety of um, customized and curated materials that are designed for the elderly to help them explore and understand their digital literacy skills that they can develop. And there's, again, lots of choices, AARP, things along those lines. Now, a next one is around, okay, we found many times the elderly, because they're sometimes financially challenged, what are ways that they can either volunteer or look at employment? And so again, here's a website customized for this population. And the purpose, again, I'm just showing these examples of, you can overwhelm people so with so many resources, and that can frustrate them. But if they begin to see that there are traditions, that the recipes that they use, that there's a connection with their community, and you are serving those resources up using those ingredients that are important for them, that they get to explore these things, then it helps build those communities and empowers and engages the elderly community there. So just to highlight a few other things around housing resources become important. Looking at how do I get home care? Again, all these different resources often are out there, and they're thinking about, here is what we have to offer, but they don't put themselves in the context for a complex combination of services. So when you're thinking about providing practical applications, you begin with the ingredients and then you think about the recipes and the simple technologies that can enable your users to be able to easily access things and get the information that they need, from keeping healthy, smart money, daily living. So hopefully this is a just an example of how we went from just a wide range of here's all the stuff that's possible to contextualizing it, and particularly the digital literacy skills for the older adult. Now, I'm just going to show you an example here too of how that same, the occasion for learning and for who you're teaching can dramatically change how you would approach and provide digital literacy skills. And this is, again, another population of English language learners. And so, what are the digital literacy skills that are important for them? So, this is where we drive it toward translation tools. What are the technologies that can enable someone who's speaking French or Spanish or Croatian, that enables them to be able to use the technology tools so they can review job applications, so they can create job applications, so they can interact and learn the skills that they need to communicate effectively. So these are the digital literacy skills. This is the purpose that they had. And again, by interviewing the English language learning populations, they then drove us to say, what are the recipes, right? What are the practices that would be most helpful, and the resources to combine them in the way that will enable them to be successful. All right. Excuse me. So hopefully you're getting a good sense of, of how to look at remixing educational, free and open educational resources to create a purposeful, useful resource that the, the elderly or the English language learners could use, right? Now, what I'm going to highlight next is just having stuff for them is not sufficient. They often need partners in the commercial and the service providers. And so on this website too, they we had to think about how the elderly reaches out to the various commercial providers, service providers, and then what do they need? Because they might be an educational service, or they might be a healthcare service, or they might be an employment service. But as I said before, people come with a variety of needs. So we try to organize all this information. So if you're a healthcare provider and someone says, yes, I'm going to be, I have to leave my apartment because I can't pay the rent. Well, you don't say, oh, well, good luck. So we provided the service providers, again, an inventory that helps their needs that cross get a job. How do you keep healthy? These are, again, resources that can help them deliver their service and contextualize the complex needs of cases. Oh, it looks like we dropped off for a second. I apologize. So I'm coming back and just saying, here we have the people in the South said, can you customize it for us? And when you have an open educational resource, you can revise, remix, retain, all these things. And so we created something for Southern New Hampshire. And then we also created something for Northern New Hampshire. And as I mentioned before, then all these different resources that we had for the providers, then they can begin to customize the materials that are most relevant for their regions. All right, so hopefully that is a case study, an example that brings together how a variety of resources can help support and our practical applications for helping elder care, particularly that how to have life in an online way that supports them. Now, ingredients by itself, not enough. Recipes, not enough. Kitchen technologies, not enough. Again, because these are complex, so you never have a single point of failure. And so that's why we need chefs when we're cooking, right? You need people to think about how do I blend, customize the recipes based on the tools that I have, because I try to make something in different kitchens. I got to think about that. And then who needs to serve it? So you have the chef, but then you have the service providers to engage the customer so they make good choices, attend that when they're eating their meals, you attend to their needs, and then they receive a certificate of completion or the bill at the end, right? So again, I'm just pushing this metaphor. So with all these cooking metaphor, we still need people who are the assistants, the providers, the teachers, who will blend all these instructional materials and the pedagogies using the technologies and engage the learners so they persist to learn those objectives, right? So all this always is about the technology resources and the practices and the technology services with the people. All right. So that's hopefully the first element. You have a sense of how an open educational strategy can be really useful for serving the needs of the elderly community. Now, in order for the elderly community to get those services, how do we provide the healthcare supporters with the skills and knowledge to be good at what they do? And I'm going to do a quick highlight of certain things, resources that we have in Merlot, which is a free and open library. There's right now over 100,000 materials that are free. People are members from around the world in Merlot, and I covered some of this in the previous presentation. But now what I'm going to focus on is healthcare, because healthcare is a very complex, multi-layered ecosystem that there's a variety of people who need to be educated and need to continue their education as they develop their skills. And this is the website. And what I'm showing you here is around that's focused on a particular, we call it our Merlot health sciences community. And in health sciences, we have over 10,000 materials, 16,000 members from around the world in health sciences, people who you can connect with. And there's 158 Merlot members affiliated with Taiwan. And one of the things I'm going to show you is the breadth of resources that we have. So I'm going to open this up again to the community portal and just give you a sense of we often have a showcase. We're highlighting something in this for the last few months. It's been spiritual nursing assessment. But what I show you here is if you look on what are all the topic areas that we have from audiology, cancer, COVID, dermatology, ENT, gastroenterology, healthcare administration, geriatrics, 78 materials in geriatrics, healthcare, internal, mental health, nursing, OBGYN, pathology, pulmonary, respiratory therapy, toxology, right? So there's a whole range of materials that the healthcare community has. And then we also help you identify what are the journals that are out there, professional organizations. So thinking about how do you use educational resources to support your healthcare community is making it convenient for them to find what they need. Again, thinking about what their needs are, and we have a little web search application that highlights new things up on the web. So hopefully you get a little sense of the uh, Merlot's healthcare collection that can be used by a whole variety of people. We also have virtual labs if you ever need some of those things. And so those are the kind of instructional, the ingredients materials for healthcare. We also have materials, the practices, and these are with having faculty develop e-portfolios that describe how have they used technology to improve the student learning and how have they engaged them. And I'm just showing you just quick screenshots of how a faculty member brought in adaptive learning with a little AI tool behind the scenes there that customized the learning experiences for the students based on their performance in various assessments. So you can then see how other faculty, the recipes that they use, and you say, this might be a nice recipe to adopt. Finally, when it comes to educational resources, again, in talking with Dr. Shin, thinking about what the topics to cover today, he also talked about the whole range of resources, and Skills Commons is another open library of free educational content, but it's focused mostly on workforce development. And so here again, this is a quick screenshot of, I typed in healthcare, and there's 3,760 materials in healthcare, and you can then search this by the healthcare occupation that you would like. Maybe you're looking for something for anesthesiologists, or maybe you're looking for lab technicians or safety specialists or occupational therapists. So there's ways to find resources that are free and open for you in Skills Commons. And just a reminder, the last time I created a little portal for you that has a lot of these open educational resources for Merlot and connections and Skills Commons for you. So again, I'll be sending this PowerPoint and you can get to the link to that for yourselves. All right. So we've covered a lot so far. And the next part we're going to really think about in coming back to cooking, okay? We've talked about the ingredients a lot. We've talked about the recipes for the different user populations that you need to put together to combine and remix materials. But now the question is around the kitchen, and we're going to be moving to how do we add generative AI to your open educational services that enable you to cook those meals. And right now, just remember, you have tools in your kitchen already, your learning management system. And one of the things I'm going to be highlighting about these things is these are tools that are templates for organizing materials in a standard shell or framework. And it enables you to deliver an instructional program to a diverse set of students, right? And typically you're going to need some intermediate or advanced digital literacy skills, authoring tools, and it's the same thing. How do I create something and then I let lots of different people use it? And one of the challenges is often that thing that you've created doesn't always meet all the needs of your learners, right? That customization is often not there. So the tools that we have in our kitchen and the recipes that we have kind of produces the same plate of food for different people who might have different needs. And this is where I want to begin to say, you know what? Generative AI really can enable you to do things that you never could have done before with other technology tools that you had in your educational kitchen. And generative AI, I think the biggest thing, it's producing productivity benefits. One of the challenges that's facing higher education is just the cost of doing work and the time it takes to do the work. That workload issue, I think, is one of the major barriers for an educational institution to be more successful in delivering their programs. So on, COVID had a dramatic impact on our students learning, particularly in the area of mathematics, and significant learning gaps um, for our students have been created. And I think generative AI, by creating customized learning resources, could help the person regain that learning by bridging those learning gaps. Now, quality benefits, in a sense, I can think about redesign. It allows that redesign process by remixing and revising things. And importantly, it can enable the personalized learning for learning pathways. And I'm going to give you some examples about how this generative AI can be used in doing things that you couldn't have done otherwise. Now, one of the things before we get to the examples here, I'm going to highlight just some of the things. The generative AI as a kitchen appliance, you have to think, okay, what's the temperature controls? What's the timer? What type of burner do I have, right? You have to, how do I control this? And well, guess what? Your prompts to generative AI are the ways that you're able to control this kitchen appliance to deliver the meals the way you want. And I'm just using two examples of there's acronyms that people have created to help you think about how do I design my prompts to make sure I'm able to cook up and combine and create the final product that will meet the needs of my learners and follow my goals that I have in my recipes, right? So there's automat. And so this is a little, I have to think about how do I want the information coming out of generative AI to act as blah, 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 to help teach who is the user and their persona, what actions do they need to take, what output do I want the requirements to have, what's the tone and style of the language, and then how typical or atypical edge cases do I want to include, and how do I keep the topic, in a sense, at the top of the list without having lots of straggling topics that distract the learner. Okay, so that's automat is the way to think, and I'll be giving an example of that. And then there's another one using CoStar to say, well, when I present a context, when I present a prompt, how do I set the context How do I say, what do I want to be achieved? Be specific and clear. Here's tone and style, the same thing. Know the audience and really make sure what's the format that you want that outcome to be. So you can see there's lots of overlap between these different acronyms and their prompting strategies. But I'm just bringing those up because I think these become, you have to know how to use the tools in your kitchen if you're going to be able to cook that good educational meal. And now here's an example. And one of the things in working with people about using generative AI is I say, ask Gen AI to do what you cannot. And here's an example. And I'm working with a chemistry faculty member who's teaching 240 students in a non-majors intro to chemistry class. And one of the effective educational practices to help the students who are not majors in chemistry um, connect with the content is to ask them to write reflections about their learning chemistry and how does it connect with their lives, or and it could even be about what are they anxious about learning, or what are the skills that they may not be familiar with, whatever it is, how to connect it to their learning experience rather than chemistry being something that someone else learns and it doesn't connect with them personally. So one of the strategies, if you say, okay, students, um, every other week, I would like you to write a reflection about how you are connecting chemistry into your lives and how you're thinking about your learning, how you're getting overwhelmed, whatever you'd like to talk about. Okay, now, what do you do with those 240 essays? How are you going to read those, summarize those, identifying the emerging concepts that come out, and get these done in a timely way for the next class so you can share that with the students, so you show how you're listening to what their experiences are and how you may adjust the teaching. There's no way that you can really do that when you're trying to do all the other things. So you think about, oh, how can generative AI analyze all these, summarize these, and provide me an outcome that quickly and easily enables me as the faculty member to understand my students' experiences. So you can have some compassion, some relevance for them. And so this is an example of doing a qualitative analysis of the student reflections. And this came out as the spectrum of the learning experiences. And and getting this done literally, and I said 30 minutes, you can actually do this quicker if you make sure you have all the date, all the student resources and their essays organized and inputted, right? But these are the things that emerged from those 240 essays that you can put on a single slide, and you can say, students are concerned about how they're going to engage in taking this course, right? There's large lectures, there's labs. Am I going to do this? And there's math in there. Am I going to enjoy this, or am I going to be too anxious about it, right? How do I connect with my other students? And how does it relate to my major in various ways, right? So these are topics that when you can then present this back to the students and they begin to say, boy, I'm not the only one that has these anxieties or worried about how I'm going to work with other students, or, am I going to be able to memorize all this stuff? Then it helps build that connectedness with the educational process. And this becomes a very important element of effectively retaining students and keeping them motivated to learn the academic content. So this is, again, one example where you say, I know what can be very pedagogically effective, but I could never do this if I didn't have generative AI to help me out. Okay. Now I'm going to give another example. And because this example is when a faculty member uses generative AI to help their teaching. Now, here's an example. The same case, I got 240 students in chemistry, right? Now, one of the challenges is when it's non-majors, I have students in the arts, in the humanities. They might be in comparative literature or taking German, or they're in social science and economics or psychology or anthropology, or in business, in accounting or real estate or management. And now, how am I going to look at all those majors and how do I connect chemistry to what they are most interested in, right? And you'd say, is there a way for me to create multiple instructional assignments that can take many of the course concepts that I have and apply them to over 30 majors that my students are pursuing? There's no way that I can do that, but can I ask Gen AI? So here's an example, really, and this is something we're really planning and prototyping right now. So this is where you give a template for a student to create a prompt to create their personalized curriculum. So I used Automat again to write out the prompt that says, act as my intro to chemistry professor, teaching me the user, a freshman art major in ceramics who hasn't taken chemistry for 3 years, right? Now, the target action, provide an example of how chemical bonding of metals and nonmetals is important to understand and apply in developing my skills as an artist. Okay, so this is what I want. Can you give me that explanation? Give me an example. And the example should include an artist's description of what they're trying to create, followed by the chemistry description of how and why it works. So you're defining what the outcome, what I want this example to describe. Use language of the artist when talking about art. Use language of the chemists when talking about chemistry, so they get to use to see how they translate between those. And finally, these examples should be cases that are relatively common in the arts, right? You don't want these wild, unusual things that aren't going to be pervasively important. So this is an example of generative AI enabling the instructional process to do something that you couldn't do individually, but that the student can create for themselves to help them see the connection between chemistry or art. And in the template, in a sense, you can see that they would say, okay, I'm a freshman in business, and what I'm looking for is how it, metals and non-metals relate to my skills in being an economist, right? So it could be related to climate change or something along those lines. Who knows what, right? That's what the AI will help you create. So hopefully we're coming to the end of the presentation here. And the takeaways here are that I think using the complexities of good cooking as a metaphor can help you plan, design, and deliver a good education. Um, Again, complex systems require a complex, multiple interactions of many factors, and managing those can go to overwhelming. And that's what the value of metaphors are, can help you think through the complexities. And these teaching and e-learning can be enabled by open educational resources, the ingredients, the practices, the recipes, and the services, the kitchen utensils and technologies, and using a user-centered design process. And Gen AI is a new appliance in your educational kitchen that you and your students can experiment with to make learning relevant. So I hope you'll be open to e-learning and Gen AI for your student success. And sometimes it feels like, how am I going to change the world, right? It's really tough. But with all these resources and how we work together, you can really create innovations that make significant changes. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the invitation to be here. And I hope this presentation is useful and helpful in your planning and designing and uses of technology to create practical applications for elder care. Thank you.